Good morning and welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is expectations and how we often precipitate our experience through the expectations that we set without even knowing that we've set them. And so we're going to look at how we can employ curiosity to broaden our experience of the world and maybe move beyond expectations. So should be an interesting conversation. And good morning, Rosalind. Welcome. So good to have you here with us this morning, and welcome to everybody else who's joining us. Before we get started, let's take a minute or two to get present. So let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, and energizing all your cells, all your molecules, your electrons, creating a brilliant beam of light and energy from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's press our palms together. Vigorously rub your hands together, feel the friction, the temperature, the pressure, the motion, and the tickling and tingling when you stop. And allow all those sensations to bring you present right here, right now, into this remarkable physical form that enables you to experience life. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Okay, so we are talking about expectations. And when we set expectations, there are ways that are more positive than others to set expectations. Most often, we set expectations without even knowing that we're doing it. And thereby we end up setting ourselves up for disappointment potentially, and also a limited experience, because with our expectations, we're kind of creating a container, which can be a beneficial thing at times. But when this is happening unconsciously, we're creating a metric by which to measure our experience. And there are a couple things about that metric. Either the experience is going to exceed your expectations, or it's going to not meet your expectations, or it's going to meet your expectations. Now, the thing is, expectations can be a self-fulfilling prophecy, where because I'm expecting something, I'm acting in a particular way that invites that response, for instance. So if I expect somebody to be standoffish, I may already be acting defensively when I approach them, right? Or if I expect to have a miserable time, it's likely that that's actually what's going to happen. It doesn't mean it's absolutely going to happen, but it's probably likely, because I'm already bracing myself for that. So in a way, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. When it also sets us up in a place of comparison, to compare what we're thinking of, what we're preempting, and then what actually manifests. So in a way, it's creating blinders for us because we're just sorting for, we're looking for the comparison or the outcome related to our expectations, which means that we might miss all kinds of peripheral information or opportunities, right? So what I want to talk about is not only the limitation of expectations, but the benefit of curiosity, perhaps, rather than expectations. Because if we go into a situation being curious, then we can, we're like a broader receptor. We have a broader capacity to recognize other input that that opportunity might present. So this is where intentionality comes in, you know, the intentionality being curiosity, or intentionality creating an open space, or creating a sense of connection, you know, with the intention of something that creates a life-affirming container. So as I'm thinking about expectations, oftentimes, if you're teaching a course, you want to set expectations or manage expectations. And what that means is you kind of want to set a container, parameters for the experience. And it doesn't mean that those parameters or that container needs to feel limiting. It can be created as an expansive container where you can invite people to participate in a broader way. You can invite people to express themselves. And what this is doing when you make such an invitation at the beginning of something is it's sort of setting the guidelines. It's sort of letting people know what kind of behavior is acceptable, or gives them a context for interpreting other people's behavior. Or I'm thinking particularly in the context of a coaching group or a class, for instance, setting the community rules, expressing this is a space where blah, blah, blah can happen. That provides people with something of a framework that gives them a sense of safety and like a very, very, very broad sense of predictability. To say, oh, okay, so I know what the nature of this place is or this space is. And it's interesting to me how comforting that can be. So on the one hand, having expectations can limit our experience. On another hand, when we create a container, when we set expectations or set parameters or give some kind of structure to a container, that can be so empowering, because then we know what the culture is that we're walking into. We know what the guardrails are. It's interesting. I've been engaged with I guess we could sort of call it a school of thought, a mastermind. I guess to me, it's an combination of those things. But the thing initially in my engagement, I was pretty reticent because I was unfamiliar with what the rules were, what the expectations were, what the culture is, what the processes are. And that gave me a lot of pause. It gave me, or in response to that, had some, um, I recognized some defensiveness in myself, some protection to like be trying to feel my way forward in the dark is what it felt like. And you're feeling your way forward in the dark in an unfamiliar place. It, there, for me anyway, is some anxiety, right? A little bit of anticipation, or it's not, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, it's not pure curiosity. It's not like a lighthearted curiosity. It's a little bit of trepidation, like, is it safe kind of thing that I noticed in myself. And when I read something that talked about the intention of this collective space, I felt great alignment with that, and that shifted or as a result, I shifted my way of being to feeling more at ease, more comfortable, more welcome to express my, I'm so sorry. I have an emergency with my cat, and I have to take this call. So I'm going to mute myself for a minute. Hello, this is Mira. Okay, so sorry about that interruption. If it weren't something of an emergency, I wouldn't have taken the call. So my cat is an aging girl. She's going to be 17 in November. And she goes through these phases where she doesn't eat and she throws up. And I'm going to be going out of town. So you'll be having replays Thursday, Friday, and Monday. But the only time they could fit me in was tomorrow. So I apologize for the interruption. And anyway, so back to expectations. We might, I kind of got off track there. I apologize for that. And I saw actually Rosalind says, so the experience takes place ahead of the actual event. I love that, right? Like we're pre-experiencing our experience, right? And Rosalind goes on to say, by doing this, limits us to pay attention to what we are expecting to happen instead of allowing the actual experience to unfold. That's exactly the case, because we've preconditioned ourselves to be sorting for something that is aligned with or misaligned with our expectations. One way to practice is when you're eating, not being distracted while eating, consciously using senses to taste food. Absolutely. So when we are present, there is a broader field. When we have curiosity, there is a broader field of potential experience, right? So Rosalind says, okay, replace Thursday, Friday, and Monday. Warm snuggles for Jules. So I thank you for that. She's almost 17, but she's still my kitten. And so somebody's going to be here taking care of her, and I'm concerned around that. So just sort of squeezing things in a very packed, busy schedule, and coordinating with other people that have packed, busy schedules, so that hopefully we can get her in good shape for while I'm away. So thanks for your wishes around that. Much appreciated. This conversation around expectations has arisen because I'm going to a retreat. And you hear all kinds of things about results of certain practices, and the temptation is to have expectations about what's going to happen. Like, you really want a certain outcome, you really are looking for a certain type of experience, and that's the inclination, right? Is to have these unconscious, unspoken expectations. And in a way, expectations are like goals. You either meet them or you don't, or you might exceed them. But they're kind of black and white. And with intentions, there's a different space, there's a different expansiveness about that experience. So it's so interesting to just be looking at the multiple ways to be able to interpret almost anything. I find it fascinating. So, like, you hear about a restaurant, you hear it's a really great restaurant. So you're going, and maybe you have a really high bar. There's someone in my family who is the critic, or has historically been the critic. And so they would go to a restaurant where they were told it was a great restaurant, and they might find a spot on a fork, or a napkin that wasn't folded properly, or the service took a little longer than expected. And those things would be the things that made the experience not meet their expectations, so that it would be a disappointing experience, despite the fact that the food was exceptional, the environment was beautiful, whatever, all these other things that were perfect and marvelous would be marred and discredited almost by these other small things that that impacted the experience. And so the things that were wrong, powered all the right, and made it a less than stellar experience. I guess in a way, we're looking at the same phenomena that impacts glass half empty, glass half full. It's the same glass, it's the same amount of liquid in the glass. And we could be looking at the glass and saying, oh, the glass has an equal amount of water and space in it, right? But we'll tend to interpret instead, it's half empty, it's half full. And some of us go into experiences with positive expectation, expecting things to be great. And then even if there are stumbling blocks along the way, we tend to focus on what's great, and others of us tend to focus on what's wrong. And, I had considered talking about complaining this morning and how it for some people, and maybe we'll visit that another time, but it's like, what is up with the complaining thing? And what is up with the need to be the critic, um, and to be having these expectations of things. It's like, oh, well, that was a disappointment. Well, where does disappointment come from? Disappointment comes from having and projecting an expectation on something that is then later not met. Um, and I recognize the importance of boundaries. And I really don't like that word, but I recognize the importance of guidelines or guardrails. Um, and at the same time, we don't want to corral ourselves into a space that is so confined and confining that we limit the richness of our experience to a point that it is stifling, right? Or even to a point where we're missing so much of the richness of life. So anyway, this is all about expectations. And what if we live in, I don't know what to expect. I don't know what to expect. I can guess that this, that, or the other thing might happen. It would be awesome if, or I hope it's not, or, like all of that is projecting us out of the moment. So it brings us back to your comment, Rosalind, when you say, so the experience takes place ahead of the actual event, which limits us limits us from being present to the actual event. So what happens if we, rather than unconsciously set expectations, we instead consciously allow ourselves to explore without expectation? What would that be? What would it be to explore without expectation? To maybe live in intention, which is a way to focus our presence and move from that space of presence. I guess the whole thing with expectations and containers is there's a huge value to container, right? Like to saying, okay, we are setting a safe space here. We are setting a space where these are the agreements that we are going to collectively abide by. And I guess the question is that setting expectations? Or is that then saying, and within this container, we don't know what will unfold. So we are setting, in that example, we're setting an expectation of safety. We're setting an expectation of community and compassionate listening, for example. And then within that, there's infinity. So this is actually, as I'm talking about the polarities of these two things, it's reminding me of Zeno's paradox, where here's a distance from A to B, and you can cut that in half, and within that half, there's an infinite number of spaces, right? An infinite number, and you can cut that in half, and there's an infinite number of spaces, and you can cut that in half ad infinitum to where you can never get from here to there. That's kind of Zeno's paradox. But what it brings to mind is that within the containers that we set, there's infinity. Within the limitation that we define for ourselves, there's infinite possibility. And this is something that I've explored a lot when working with different doctrines or whatever around food, or different schools of thought, like macrobiotics, vegetarianism, veganism, raw foods. Within those constraints, gluten-free, whatever, within the constraints, there are an infinity of possibilities that can be explored and potentials. And so maybe that's this story with expectations, is if we can meter our expectations to be broad enough, and maybe is expressing an essence of experience rather than the details of it, like whether the napkins are folded properly, for instance, at a restaurant, and to make it an enriching evening, for instance. We give ourselves more space to live. We give ourselves more space to breathe, more space to truly experience the richness of life. And so really what this conversation is about is to have a look at places that you might have expectations that you're not even aware of, to bring those expectations conscious, so that then you can deal with them responsibly, right? And we often have expectations of others, and without their agreement, right? Without their alignment, and it's often a cause for friction and disappointment. And so maybe bringing those expectations conscious, maybe that's what this is all about, is to really just look at what our unspoken expectations are. And as we bring them conscious, we can then interact with them in a more mindful and present way. So anyway, that's it for today. I so appreciate your going through this roller coaster and loop-de-loops with me to just explore these ideas. I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection, and I go live here each weekday morning on Enlightened World Network and Enlightened World on Enlightened World Network Facebook page and YouTube channel at 9 a.m. Eastern. And I invite you to check out the other awesome programs